one more bit of ado, I suppose. I'm from Denver. I'm based in Denver, which is of course a major spot for the cannabis world these days. And I worked on the Amendment 64 campaign, and we spent so many mornings looking at the news coming out of Washington, terribly, terribly jealous. Because the institutional support here in Washington for cannabis business, for changing policy, was far more than we ever could have imagined. It was because of some of the people in this room, like City Attorney Pete Holmes, like Representative Roger Goodman, and Mayor Mike McGinn. So I think it's a great honor that we have the opportunity to stand here today in this emerging business and be supported by elected officials who are ready to recognize that the implementing I-502 and moving forward with this business is smart policy, it's good policy, and it's a great way to move Seattle and Washington forward. Without any further ado, Mayor Mike McGinn.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's really interesting. Well, first I just want to springboard off a couple of the remarks that were made. I was a lawyer in private practice, volunteering in my community, and I read this report. I think it was the King County Bar Association did a report on drug laws, and it was Roger Goodman, who's here today, had done that. And you know, people like to occasionally make fun of lawyers or the like. But I have to say, that was a day that I was really immensely proud of my profession, because members of the profession, and Roger in particular, had really spoken clearly about the harms that were caused by a drug policy and a drug war. It just didn't make sense. And so, again, I was really proud of him, and Roger went on to even bigger and better things, ran for office, and when the issue of the work he had done previously for the Bar Association was brought up, it didn't hurt him in his campaign. In fact, it probably helped him a little bit in his campaign because he had taken such a sensible approach to it. So I told the story in the other room when I was running for office. I knew at some point I'd be asked my position on marijuana legalization. This is Seattle, after all. And I thought about it, and I gave the answer that if every elected official who had ever tried marijuana voted to legalize it, it would be legal in an instant. And yeah, everybody laughs. And that was a good answer, and nobody really paid any attention to it. And then after I got elected, it came to the attention of the media then that I actually was in favor of marijuana legalization. It was interesting, and I asked around. I discovered I was the first big city mayor that had come out in favor of marijuana legalization. Again, it wasn't an issue in the campaign. I don't think it was really an issue subsequent to that either. Since being mayor, my feelings on the issue only became stronger. Earlier this year, we had 23 murders in the first 5 months of the year, which now Seattle, compared to other cities, has a much, much lower murder rate. But for us, that was almost as many as we had in the prior year, within the first 5 months. And I made it a point to go to every one of the sites where there had been a murder and have the head of our investigations team tell me what they knew. And far too many of them were drug rip-offs, where one person or another had a gun, or maybe both, with the intention of robbing the other, and it led to a murder. So this black market, making marijuana a black market trade, was fueling criminal violence. It was having a disproportionate effect on our youth. You look at the arrest rates and incarceration rates, and there was the number of black and Latino youth that were being sent away to jail compared to white youth, even though the usage rates were not that far different. It was just amazing. So for all of those reasons, I became even more firm in my belief that we needed to change these laws, and that we'd have a better, safer city if we could do that. And put on the ballot, a lot of people worked really hard, and it passed, which was great. Now I want to, at some point during last fall, I was at an event, and I met Hillary Bricken, and she suggested I come out and speak to folks in the industry at some point, and then I got this invitation. It was kind of interesting to think about it, Because it was like, well, it's a trade association. This is like the realtors or the home builders or, whomever, right? They want to know the legal and regulatory lay of the land that we're now facing because they're trying to figure out how to make their businesses operate. And boy, how quickly things change, right? And the very fact that there's a trade industry that wants to know what the legal and regulatory framework is, I have to say when I go to those other meetings, they're not usually attended by so many cameramen and reporters. I mean, it's fascinating where we are today, right? The fact that this is a new normal is so unusual, right? So what does that mean? And I think we're all trying to figure that out, by the way. So and I'm very intrigued to hear what your questions will be, but I'm sure you're all trying to figure out, what does the legal and regulatory framework look like? What does it mean? You're also probably asking the questions of, what will be the new social and cultural norms around marijuana? I'm pretty interested in figuring out what that is too, or learning about it, because it's not what it was. It's going to be something different, and what it will be created by you, they'll be created by the public, they'll be created by the policymakers as we make our rules. Now, I'm presuming a fair number of you are from Seattle, but those that aren't, we, in our city, by initiative a number of years ago, had taken the position that enforcement of possession of small amounts of marijuana was the lowest enforcement priority for our police, and they took that, quite seriously in their actions. We then had medical marijuana laws passed and then changed, and we took the position that we would honor and enforce the state laws. And so we then had to try to figure out what is our regulatory framework locally to deal with that. It's kind of interesting, and we're still working on that, by the way. Now that it's legal, possession is legal, and we're going to see a regulatory framework. We will speak to the state liquor control board as they enter into that process, representing the interests of the city as best we can. So speaking from the perspective of mayor, the interests of the city are in public safety. It's always in public safety, quality of life. We will hear concerns from people about youth access to marijuana. There'll be concerns about that. I'm heartened because I believe this new law will make it more difficult for kids to get it than it is today. So that's a positive. As a city, we have zoning rules about what businesses can be where, which we were already trying to figure out how to make medical marijuana. Okay, so that's a pharmacy, I guess. So where are pharmacies allowed? Somebody wants to grow it, well, what do we allow? And by the way, we have rules on what you can grow where. I mean, we recently made it legal to grow vegetables in your planting strip. Who knew? But it actually wasn't legal until we made it legal. So then we do have rules. How many goats can you have? How many chickens can you have? These are things that cities regulate. So where can you grow marijuana? Well, guess what? We regulate what type of tree you can grow in your planting strip as well. So these are the types of questions that we're going to have to grapple with as a city with regulatory authority. But again, because the framework will primarily be set at the state level, we're going to have to address that as well. And we're going to have to give, I believe in the city of Seattle, the vote in favor is probably much higher than it was across the rest of the state. But even so, people do have concerns. And I'm in town halls and I hear people expressing concerns about the medical marijuana shops that are everywhere. And they are everywhere. I joked it's, my neighborhood, I've noticed them popping up, and I've joked it's putting the green in Greenwood. So all the green crosses up there. So it's something that people look at and say, well, what does that mean? And what does that mean for my neighborhood? And how will my neighborhood be different as a result of this? And should I get engaged? And if it's anything I've learned as mayor in Seattle, it's really important to give everybody that opportunity to engage in that dialogue. It's their place. And they want to be heard, and they want to understand what's going to occur. So the industry is clearly moving fast, changes are occurring fast, but we also have a community that, while in Seattle is supportive of the new law, they're also going to have very strong interests in how it manifests itself and what it looks like in their neighborhood. And we're going to have to make sure as a city that we're listening and responding to that as well as we proceed. So I'll stop my remarks there. I'm interested to hear your questions. I'm not sure I'm the best or the most knowledgeable person about some of the intricacies of this, so If I run into trouble, I may reach out to the audience and ask for a little help from people who I know are a little smarter on this than me.